Y'all, welcome to the 12th episode of the Better Leader Podcast. My name is Logan. Glad you are with us today. If you caught last week's episode, you know that this is the second of 4 episodes that will be coming out this month. And at the beginning of each of these episodes, we're going to be talking about winning friends and influencing people because, as John Maxwell says, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And you want to grow your influence, which is why you're listening to a podcast like this in the first place. 2 things as we get going. The first is if you enjoy this podcast, if you're watching it on YouTube, if you've subscribed to the channel, leave a comment, or if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts from, go ahead and rate and review it. That would mean a lot to me as we seek to grow this community of people who are seeking to grow in their leadership. So how to win friends and influence people. Last episode, we talked about the power of smiling, how it's free, it's easy to do, and it's effective. And the second is asking people questions. Now, the third and fourth principles for gaining friends and helping to win over people that we're going to talk about today, they really go along with the first 2. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the principle of being interested over being interesting. And this goes right along with the desire to ask people questions, which we talked about last week. I also referenced a conversation I had on the podcast. It was episode number 4 with Andrew Albritton, the power of meaningful conversations. I would say if you're interested in this topic more, go and listen to that episode because Andrew is an expert communicator, gives great insight into how to ask questions, but also in this topic of not just being interested, but being interested in other people. Now, I think it's natural for most of us to say, we would love to be an interesting person. We would love to be someone that others want to talk to, that others want to be friends with and have a relationship with. But what's more valuable than being an interesting person is being interested in others. And there's actually a direct relationship here. It's not an inverse relationship. In order to be interesting, you don't not take an interest in other people. That would be inverse. The direct relationship is that if you want to be more interesting to others, be more interested in other people. I want to give you an example. I spoke at an event a couple of years ago. It was an FCA event, and there were some other leaders there in our community, and there was a pastor there, and his name's Dwayne Hoffman. I had never met Dwayne before. I had heard his name and knew who he was from just his involvement in our community. So my wife and I attended this event, as did he and his wife, and we sat at a table with him. And what I noticed was when I left, I was like, man, he made me feel really good about myself. I felt so encouraged whenever I left. And what I realized is he took such an interest in me. Here I am, younger. He has no reason to have a conversation with me. Here's someone who, in his role as a pastor, he's pouring himself out all of the time. He could have very easily just said, hey, this event is not at my church. I'm going to just kind of sit back and coast. But he took an interest in my wife and I. His wife and Dwayne, they took an interest in my wife and I. And we left and we walked away feeling encouraged. And this is the only interaction I've actually had with him in person. And you know what? Here I am, a year and a half, 2 years later, still talking about it because of how encouraged he made me feel. When you walk into a space, what are you looking for? Are you looking to be the interesting person in the room, or are you looking to be interested in other people? Now, we referenced it last time. You can become intrusive and crossing the line and being way too interested in other people. There is some social tact with this. You want to be genuinely interested in people because people can see through it when it's fake. I never forget the first time I met a guy who was in kind of a sales role, if you will, and I met him at a social event. And he took an interest in my family and myself, and he was asking questions. And very quickly, it became to the point where he's asking me so many questions about myself, it kind of crossed a line into, okay, this is like, what's the angle here? And then I found out what he did, and then he invited me to go to get coffee because he was looking to further what he was trying to sell. And that left me not feeling great, right? I look at that interaction and it was kind of a turnoff to wanting to spend more time with this guy. I didn't have an interest in what he was selling then because he was taking an interest in my family and myself because of what he was trying to sell. That feels fake. That's going to turn people off. But when you genuinely care about people, when you genuinely care about the mission and purpose of your organization or the purpose in your life, when you take an interest in other people out of love and actually seeing value in them, that is an attractive quality to have. That is a contagious quality to have. That is a quality that's going to be a multiplier in the rooms that you walk into. But it's way more important to be interested in other people rather than to be interesting. There's a humility in that. There's a putting in the needs of others before yourself. And if, as leaders, if you want to add value to other people, you've got to take an interest in them, not for what you're trying to sell or what you're trying to grow, but because you care about them and you believe in the mission and vision of what you are trying to do. There's some social tact with this, so it can be tricky, but it is really, really important. The second thing, if you want to grow your influence and gain greater leadership, is build other people up. It sounds so obvious, right? Build others up. Don't tear them down. I would wish to sit here and tell you that this is something that comes so natural to me. However, as I look at kind of the habits of relationship forming that I've fallen into, sometimes I can lead with being a little bit snarky, or I could lead with wanting to be funny. And at the expense of someone else, I might make a joke to try and make other people like me that actually ends up tearing other people down. Naturally, kind of a way for some reason that I've developed showing affection is really jabbing at people. And this isn't a good trait that I have. It's something that I'm currently trying to grow past and to grow really a greater understanding, a more of an awareness of how that is perceived by other people. Because my natural instinct isn't always to build other people up. But building other people up is so important. If you gain influence, and you can gain influence and tear other people down. There's a whole slew of leaders historically who have this great amount of influence, but they tear people down. Now, they're not utilizing their influence for the betterment of other people, but that influence they're using their influence in creating a worse culture, and it's creating a worse environment for the people around them. Just because you have influence doesn't always mean it's going to be used for good. But there's power in building other people up. And we know this. I think it was so evident whenever I was coaching how important this was. I always wanted to push people and to have a drive and to maybe push someone harder to see that, hey, you as an athlete, you can achieve more than what you think. But there's a balance there in pushing and building other people up. Now, I think as a leader, this can sometimes be difficult because you care about what you do. You have a drive and a determination. And with drive and determination, sometimes can come along with it criticism. Now, you have to be able to look at things with a critical eye and be able to take the blinders off and not just be blindly optimistic. We're like, oh, everything is good. You have to be able to give critical feedback and to be able to look at things critically, but you don't want to fall into the realm of being a cynic as a leader. It's so easy to find things that are wrong. You can find things that are wrong with every person, every situation, every organization. It's easy to fixate and focus on what's wrong. It's a little bit harder. I think it goes against our human nature often to build others up because sometimes it can feel awkward to compliment somebody as well. I've certainly felt that before, but I'm trying to lean into this idea of if I see it, I should say it. If I see something positive in someone else, I should say it. I'll give you this as an example, and you can think of examples in your life when someone else has built you up. I remember back when I first started speaking and started preaching messages at High Street, and it was this was back in 2013 or 2014. I remember I gave a message, and one of my friends, Tiffany Lyons, after I gave that message, she came up to me and she said, "Logan, that was so good. I spend time around a lot of people who are training to be preachers and to speak. And I just really believe that God has gifted you in that way. I still remember where I was when she told me that. I still remember the attitude which she told me with it. And I still carry it today because it was something that built me up and encouraged me. I remember when I was in high school, my history teacher, Mr. George, pulling me aside after I had completed an essay and saying, hey, you know what? I can tell you really care about your work. And I remember he gave me that feedback and that compliment. And I was at a stage in life right there where I was self-conscious. I have a twin brother who is one of the smartest guys I know. And I felt self-conscious because I felt like I wasn't as smart and as gifted as him. And in many ways, I'm not as intelligent and gifted as he is in many areas. But I had some self-consciousness in that area of my life. And those words that Mr. George spoke to me, they built me up and encouraged me in a way that still at 33 today, I remember being 18 years old, him pulling me aside, 17 years old, a junior in high school, and telling me, hey man, you really do good work. Now, on the flip side of that, we can also remember when people have torn us down. I remember one time a coach, he was making a joke to the team, and it was kind of on my behalf. And I remember it really actually kind of hurt deep down inside. As I mentioned, at that time, especially in high school, you're kind of vulnerable. And I remember that it hurt me. Now, this man is a great man, and I have a lot of respect for him. But it just kind of hurt. And I have made that mistake so many times in my interactions with people and trying to be funny or trying, to have woo, to develop relationships. I've crossed a line and I've used humor, and it's actually torn somebody down. And what I'm having to learn in my leadership is humor is a great asset, but it's something that you have to be cautious with. I would rather not be funny and build people up than be funny and people think me as funny and tear other people down. If you want to be a leader and you want to gain influence, build other people up. So what's your takeaway from this in your organization, in your workplace this week is if you see a positive attribute, if you see it, say it. If you see it, say it. Build other people up, and it's going to increase your influence. Now, the thing that I want to talk about a little bit today as we in this episode is living in the tension as a leader. I've noticed this. As my leadership has grown, as my influence has grown, as I have developed or gained more responsibility within my family, within my organization, within my community, what I found is as I've grown in influence, and influence is leadership, as I've grown in leadership, I often encounter more problems, that there's more people who are coming to you and seeking advice for situations. And guess what I've learned? I can't solve everything. I don't often even know where to begin in solving what's happening. And it's a good thing that people are coming to you. It's a good thing when people are seeking after you for advice. I think sometimes leaders can become inundated. We can become inundated with the needs of others, and we start to become bitter about that. But remember, in leading, you signed up for this. If you want to be a leader, you signed up to be dealing with the problems. So don't get bitter about it. Enjoy it and understand that it's part of the process and how you can add value to the others around you. But I've had to learn, and I've learned this really well from my boss, my leader, Eddie Lyons, Pastor Eddie Lyons, who leads us here at High Street. I have learned so much that often you have to just live in the tension as a leader. You're going through transitions on your staff, and people are asking you what you're going to do. You don't have an answer, you got to live in that tension. Someone's coming to you with a problem that you've never dealt with before. You're not really sure how to respond. You just need to live in the tension. People are coming to you and they're seeking, hey, can we move forward in this? Is this a wise decision? And you don't know because you've never tried it either. Live in the tension of not knowing. It's okay to not have all the answers. I think I've learned when I started in leadership, I wanted to control every situation and every circumstance. But as I've learned a couple of things, as I live in the tension, some problems iron themselves out. some issues that people, as a leader, you're going to have people that come to you upset. Sometimes time is just going to heal that wound and it's going to iron itself out. And then with many problems, time is going to add clarity to what's going on. And as you can, I think that the worst thing you can do as a leader is overreact when situations come about. I think you would rather underreact than overreact. Now, there's a balance. You can be not responsive as a leader, and that's going to be a major problem as well. Because if people in your organization see you never taking action or not wanting to face the things that are hard, you're going to lose respect. But if we had to ask ourselves, would we rather overreact or underreact? I think you want to slide on that scale of being someone who's a little bit slower to react. Because when you're slower to react, that time provides clarity. It often is going to provide clarity as well. What else happens whenever you slow things down and you live in the tension? It gives you an opportunity to seek wisdom and insight from other people. As a leader, you're only as good as the team of people you have around you. And I'm so thankful that in my leadership, whether it's at home with my family, that my wife and I are a team, whether it's at church and we have a team of people in our ministries that get to make decisions together when we face hard things. Having a team and a unit is essential in being able to respond. But I just want to challenge you in your leadership. Don't be afraid to live in the tension. There's going to be people coming to you wanting to solve all of the problems. Sometimes you just have to live in the tension that you don't know right now, and you don't know what the next step is, and that's okay. Live in the tension. Stop trying to control everything. Control what you can control, and then be ready to respond with swift action when things are of immediate and pressing needs. Because some situations and circumstances present themselves, you do have to respond immediately, and that's important. But don't be afraid to slow it down. And I also want to challenge you with one other lasting thought, one other thought to just take away with is, I think it's always important we debunk the personality myth in leadership. I think oftentimes in leadership, it's thought of that the type A person who stands in front of the crowd and communicate, that is the best leader around. Well, I just want to debunk that because I look at someone like my wife, who is more, I've mentioned this before, is more of a behind-the-scenes leader. She thrives in one-on-one conversations. I see this with people around me that there's all these different personality types which are actually effective as a leader in different ways. If we all had the same personality or all leaders had the same personality, every organization, every place would look the same. But I want to challenge you, lean in to your personality. However you're wired. Now, if there's flaws there, we want to address them and deal with them, but don't be ashamed of your personality. Don't be afraid of what you gravitate towards. If you're more introverted, that's okay. Don't be afraid to bust out of that shell and to try and increase your capacity to have interactions, but that's all right to know that you thrive in one-on-one situations. If you're more extroverted, enjoy that. Enjoy being in front of people and being able to communicate and having a lot of different interactions, but don't be afraid also to have that one-on-one conversation and to drift away and to spend time alone. Whatever your personality is look at it and say, what are the strengths here and how can I lean into it? And I say that to say this, is oftentimes I talk to people, here's the motivation in even bringing this up. I talk to people and they don't think of themselves as leaders. Leadership is influence and everybody has it. So regardless of your personality type, there's always things to grow in, right? But you are wired a certain way for a specific reason. And in every personality type, there are strengths. And so when I sit down across from somebody and they don't view themselves as a leader because they don't have X, Y, or Z, I just want to tell them, don't buy into that myth. Don't buy into the personality myth. There are a multitude of different types of people who are effective leaders, and they're effective in different ways. In your organization, lean into that and lean into the strengths of different types of personalities. Well, y'all, thanks for joining us for the 12th episode of the Better Leader Podcast. We'll catch y'all next week.